Last week, UPS and the Teamsters came to a tentative agreement that will be voted on by the rank and file over the first few weeks in August. The vote goes from August 3rd to August 22nd. While initial and subsequent reporting emphasized gains for workers, including ours, by the way, we did put out that segment talking about all the gains that are in that TA. Some members were disappointed with those terms. And so we're going to take a look around just to see some of this feedback, because I think it is very important that we hear from the workers who are going to vote no, as is their right, obviously. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in just a little bit. But I want to pull up just some tweets that caught our eye over here on social media. So this is the first one from Teamsters Mobilize. We are calling all rank and file UPS Teamsters to vote no. We are ready to fight. So this outlines some of the shortcomings of the new TA. $21 starting wage for part-timers is a joke. $25 is the low, so they weren't happy with that increase. Catch-up raises up to $150, a total insult to long-timers. No guarantees yet that MRAs are permanent, so they can still slash our wages without any notice. They are looking to get that base pay up to $25 an hour. They want base part-timer pay at $25 an hour, catch-up raises of 75 cents per year of service, 5% annual part-timer wage increase, and a 4-hour shift guarantee for all part-time workers. That is a big one. If you remember what I was saying, because I worked as a UPS preloader for a few months. It was going to be a full-time job, but it ended up being seasonal because they tried to pull something where they told me there was only a 50-50 chance they'd admit me to the union after the holidays, so I quit at that point. But when you show up to preload in the middle of the night, what UPS often does is they will hire more people than they need, figuring a lot of people are going to quit. So they'll be overstaffed. So you'll show up at 1:30 in the morning, all suited up, having woken up in the middle of the night and driven to the warehouse, and they'll say, sorry, we don't need you, go home, and they won't pay you at all. So having the 4-hour guaranteed minimum is good, so that if they do that to you, they at least have to make it worth your while that you got up, drove there, and drove back, at which point they're likely to put you to work for the 4 hours if they got to pay you either way. But that also takes some of the workload and the stress of the job off of the people who are already working. So that's definitely a good demand. So, you definitely have factions of workers here who are prepared to vote no. We'll take a look at this other group of workers here, which posted a very, very short video.
Preload!
This is preload, is what I used to do.
Denton preload! What are you going to do?
Easy one there. This is from Luigi Morris, who has done labor reporting for a while. He reported on the last UPS contract dispute as well. UPS part-timers at Griffin, Georgia are also voting no on the tentative agreement. Our people deserve better, said Jess Lee, a preloader for nearly 6 years and a member of Teamsters Mobile. There you could see them posing with the X's on the ballot. And yep, that's what the preloading job is. Those boxes come down and you have to get them in those trucks in the right places very, very quickly for a very long time with only one 10-minute break per shift in the dead of night. One 10-minute break.
And jobs like that, there's something that people who don't work in those kinds of fields, like construction, or don't know people who work in those fields, those jobs will destroy your body over time.
Of course.
Like eventually, by the time, people who work in construction, by the time they're 50, I've never known anybody who worked in construction who by the time they were 50, their knees are fucked up, their shoulders are fucked up, they have all kinds of joint problems. Your body just is not made to do these kinds of repetitive motions all day, every day. There's, you're talking about a lot of toll on your body that these jobs take. And, this amount of pay doesn't nearly compensate for the long-term effects of doing this, of what that's going to do to you.
Oh, yeah, no. I mean, it is absolutely brutal work. That's why a lot of preloaders graduate to drivers, because that's kind of the way you work your way up. But a lot of people don't want to be drivers because they don't want to work the 12-hour shift from 7 to 7 and have no life outside. They just like to make extra money as a part-timer while everybody else is dreaming right? And then they'll maybe take a part-time gig here or there, but they need enough money, they need enough wages to be able to do that, because to balance that sort of overnight work, even though it's only part-time, just because of how brutal it is, and just how unforgiving the hours are, yeah, they want $25 an hour, and there are a lot of them who say that they're not going to vote yes on this TA because they're going to hold out for a better deal. And in the words of Kshama Sawant, they are going to escalate for a better deal. So Kshama Sawant's new organization, what's that?
Well, this is it. Like, even I know we have a very broad spectrum of ideology in our audience, from communists to MAGA,
right?
But even if you're pro capita, no, it's true. I mean, even
say from communist to fascist. We have a lot of fascists in the audience. We love you.
Look, we're suckers for the fashion.
Shout out to our fascists in the audience.
Nobody can take. You guys have the best fashion sense. The communists,
right?
Come on, step off with those uniforms,
right?
The gray world you people live in. But it's not. This is what you have to understand, because a lot of conservatives, a lot of creeps like Jim Cramer, they'll try to make it out that the money's not there to pay these wages. It's just a question of how it's distributed. Because if you look at the earnings reports of these companies, they're making money hand over fist. They're making billions and billions of dollars. It's that when you look at worker actions like this, and if you want to apply this nationwide, it's reversing. It's an attempt to reverse what's happened over the last 40 years, where all of this money has just been funneled to the CEOs, funneled to the executives, and funneled to the shareholders. And when you talk about that, they're going to try to say to you, well, but what about Americans' retirement accounts if the stock values drop? It is, I forget the exact number, but the majority of stocks are held by a very small number of people. Most of those stocks are not held in people's 401ks and not held in their pensions. Not to mention the fact that if everyone was getting paid better, they would have more money to put into their retirement as well. So this is really about distribution of wealth. It's not that you're going to crash these companies, because that's the argument we're going to start hearing.
This is about getting them to spread the profits around more than they are now. It's very simple.
And the money's
there. They have
there.
a lot of money. They don't want to give it to the workers who generate the wealth for them. It's as simple as that. Now, Kshama Sawant, whose new organization, Workers Strike Back, actually had a conference call about this very issue today, which I actually sat in on for a little while. I didn't get to sit in on the whole thing. But she, in a recent interview with our friends over at RBN, talked about why her organization is going to support the no votes amongst the rank and file. Let's hear her. This is about a minute.
So what are we seeing here? Obviously, this tentative agreement, as the Teamster leadership is saying, that this is something that they support. But as we said in our tweet and Worker Strike Back, it's actually the rank and file that needs to decide. And we will be supporting the rank and file in this. But, just to get into some of the specifics of what is in the contract, union leadership is saying that the contract this tentative agreement will end the hated two-tier system. Obviously, there was the main issue for that, and wages are the main issue for the workers. But what we're seeing here is that multiple tiers are already baked into the massive wage differential between full-time workers and part-time workers, and between drivers and inside workers. The tentative agreement does not create 10,000 new full-time jobs, which it's a victory for the UPS executives. And then in addition to that, the tentative agreement, it opens the door to creating a new low-paid tier of part-time workers forced to use their own vehicles to get more hours. I mean, we should actually be fighting to end the so-called personal vehicle driver classification altogether, not allowing UPS to expand it. This is why Workers Strike Back is urging the Teamster rank and file to vote no on the tentative agreement and to join us in the fight for the contract that UPS workers deserve. Workers Strike Back is hosting a public meeting on Sunday, July 30th at 3 p.m. Eastern, where rank and file Teamsters will be speaking, and then groups like Teamsters Mobilize and Joe Allen, the author of The Package King, will also be there. So I don't have the registration link with me, but if you go to workerstrikeback.org, you should.
Well, that happened this afternoon. Like I said, I sat in on a little bit of that. Teamsters Mobilized was the first tweet that we showed you guys. And, like I said, as someone who worked overnight at a UPS warehouse for a few months back in 2020, I'm sort of more familiar with what the job entails and the sort of disparities between, driver pay, loader pay, and things like that. So the two things that I just want to point out there as a matter of specifics, when she talks about the two-tier system, about how the wages for drivers, they got a better deal out of this than the inside workers, that's a concern you have, because the thing you would hate to see, obviously, in this situation is the drivers all vote yes because they got a better deal and the inside workers all vote no, and now you have a divided workforce. That's something that is a concern, if I'm being honest. And then in terms of the personal vehicle loophole, where they hire out people to use their own personal vehicles as either independent contractors or whatever arrangement they set up with them. I guess it depends on how long they're going to be using it for.
A lot of these companies do that, right?
Yeah,
they do a lot. Lasership only does that. Right?
Lasership is only that. Yep, only owner operators, independent contractors. I interviewed for them as well. But the thing is, if you were to do away with those personal vehicles, you would create a lot of jobs, because you would have to basically overhaul the entire infrastructure of the company. You would need new warehouses because you'd need more trucks. Either that, or you'd have to have 2 overnight shifts that rotate out, because these warehouses are built, they are spaced out to the inch. These trucks you saw in some of the photos we showed, they parked an inch from each other. So if you're not using personal vehicles, which are loaded out in the back, you're going to have more conveyor belts, more warehouse space for trucks, and probably more sorting stations as well. I would imagine the volume would be too much. You'd be there for 10 hours if you didn't do that. So there are certain specifics there that they would have to implement in order to satisfy all of those demands. But without litigating every single one, I think overall she makes a very strong point, because the fact that labor got a lot of concessions on this first round of negotiation means that I think labor has good reason to smell blood in the water. And once you have management back on its heels, that's when you have to get as much as you can get. Because as we know, as Americans, those opportunities don't come around very often. These contracts are negotiated every 5 years. So before they get another bite at the apple, 5 years are going to go by. So if you have a situation where management has already given a lot, that's not time to say, okay, thanks very much. That could be time to, as Kshama says, go for even more. And the thing that makes me trust Shama's judgment on this is that she is very, very conscious of the risk of defeat. She throughout her activism and throughout her career on the Seattle City Council, understands this is why she was so critical of Bernie this second time around, because she says repeated defeats have a demoralizing effect on your movement. Movements thrive on victories. They run on victories and they die on losses. So she's not the kind of person to pick a fight that she doesn't think she can win. She's very, very precise in that way.
She's
that's
one
why
of the
she has
very
racked up
few really effective strategic thinkers on the left, period.
Exactly. You would not get reelected. I don't know exactly how many times it was. You would not get reelected 4 or 5 times to the city council in Amazon's home city if you didn't have very good instincts about what fights you can win and how to win them. And so the fact that she's saying go for it, I absolutely trust her judgment on that. And so I would have to say, yeah, go for it. Get more. Get more.
This is something, and I think Kshama, this is what she's trying to address with Worker Strike Back. We, as a people, the American people, it's really the frog in the pot of boiling water. We have so slowly lost our power and lost our rights and lost our sense of dignity in regards to labor, that it's going to really take an awakening of class consciousness to get it back. There was a time when Americans had a very strong sense of the antagonism between labor and management, and they've slowly had that massaged out of them and also settled into a kind of learned helplessness, a belief that the system cannot be beaten, that it cannot be overthrown. But you have to remember that these entrenched interests, as powerful as they seem, they are no more powerful than the monopolists and robber barons of the Gilded Age were, arguably less so, because we have means of organizing and communicating that didn't exist at that time. It's a question of waking people up to their power, because in the end, shit can't run without us. That is what they realized back then. And that's
Right.
why you had all of these mass strikes and labor actions. And eventually you did get the capitalist class to give in. And that's how we had this kind of golden era of the American middle class that's been completely hollowed out now. To get that back and to make it more distributed among the population, i.e., not racist in the way that it was the first time around, where it's basically white people enjoying that, but getting it distributed to everybody. We need to once again pick up the lectures, the lessons of the labor movement, of the golden era of labor. We need to get together across. I understand we have a lot of people in our space that don't like to get into culture issues because they see it as a distraction from this. They see it as a distraction from the real fight that has to happen. Unfortunately, culture, they're not mistaken in believing that that's been laid as a trap to keep us all divided. It is. Absolutely, it is a trap. But it's a trap. That's what makes it such an effective trap. It's a trap we have to defeat. You can't ignore it. You can't just go around it. It's just not possible. We do have to take those things on as well. But I do agree, and I think this is something we can all agree on. The best antidote to that is to focus on what unites us, which is the battle of labor against management. And it's something that very systematically the American people have been taught to forget about or taught not to think in terms of.
Please clap.